Good afternoon. My name is Sarah. I serve as the board administrator for the Texas State Board of Examiners of Marriage and Family Therapists. Thank you for attending today's meeting. I'll call the roll. Dr. Merchant.
Present.
Dr. Barty.
Present.
Dr. Elder.
Present.
Mr. Francis.
Gleefully here.
Mrs. Husband Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Parrish.
Here.
Reverend Dr. Skoma, I believe that the last meeting indicated he could not attend today. Mrs. Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Chaplain Stoglen.
Present.
We have a quorum, and with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Merchant.
Welcome everybody to our meeting. This meeting is officially called to order. Agenda item number 2 is approval of the minutes from the April 14th video conference board meeting. I move that we approve the minutes.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise their hand. That is unanimous, and that passes. We don't have anything for agenda item number 3, 4, or 5. So that gets us down to agenda item number 6, report of agreed orders executed by the council's executive director. Is there any discussion over agenda item number 6? Okay. Then let's move on to agenda item number 7, report of cases dismissed by the council's executive director. There's only one that was dismissed. Any discussion here? Okay. Moving then on to agenda item number 9, report of compliance with agreed orders. Any discussion? I'm sorry, actually 8 and 9. So status report of the quarterly enforcement case activities as well as compliance with agreed orders. Is there any discussion on agenda items 8 or 9?
I had a question.
Yes.
Okay, so at the bottom of this report is an added row for compliance report, and that had typically been provided in the past in a separate report with details about in what parts they were in compliance or out of compliance with. And I really appreciate this being tacked on here. I'm just curious about the reasoning behind. Right.
So we wanted to provide the board with a report that we are monitoring the compliance. But the problem with providing the separate report with all of those details is that should someone allegedly not be in compliance with their board order, then technically the board members who reviewed it before might need to recuse before they review the allegation that the board order was not followed. So staff has determined that perhaps this shorter, just the numbers type of report would be a better way to proceed. Did I explain that correctly, Attorney Patrick?
I think it was a good summary. Yeah, we're looking to make sure we don't conflict out any board members from future disciplinary actions. There is a whole section of the enforcement division that focuses on compliance. They track the orders when they come in, and they track compliance with all of the terms of the order. They follow up with the respondent and make sure they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. And if they don't do it, staff then sends Daryl, hey, let's open a complaint, and we open up a new complaint against them, and then you'll see a second complaint on that person. But we're wanting to make sure we don't conflict people out. I mean board members specifically out of voting on those disciplinary actions in a future case.
Did that answer the question?
It did, thank you.
Any other further discussion about agenda items 8 or 9?
Just an observation that I appreciate evidently what we're doing as far as at university level and with supervision level to have such a low number of the pending number of complaints that we have in comparison to some of the other boards. And that continues to be a source of reassurance to me that the way in which we are preparing marriage and family therapists in Texas seems to be within some really good ethical guidelines.
Sure.
I think also, I mean, I totally agree with your rants, but we also have the smallest board. And so some of it could also just be related to like the number of licenses we have to
No, I'm
But I like-
gonna,
but I
I'm
like
gonna
your-
go with mine.
I like your explanation.
I'm a reframer, and said, no, low numbers, low numbers.
Our people are just more ethical.
That's what
Exactly.
I wouldn't go that far, but I would second that.
Okay, let's see here. So any other further discussion of agenda items 8 or 9? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 10. This is a report from the committee chairs. So I'm going to begin with you, Dr. Elder, and the Ethics Committee.
Okay, so the Ethics Committee held 2 meetings since our last full board meeting. On May 18th, we met and heard 4 cases. We were able to talk to some of the respondents who chose to attend and participate. 2 of those were settled with agreed orders, and 2 were referred back. We need more information before we can actually make a decision. So those are still in process. And then we met again on June 16th, and the purpose of that meeting was just to kind of look at some of the cases that had already been adjudicated to make sure, you know, if we're going to be an ethics committee, it's our job to just do our due diligence to see what kind of decisions are being made. And we had some very robust conversations in that meeting. And we reviewed actually 8 cases from Q2 and 4 cases from Q3. And we determined that all cases had been very appropriately settled. And one thing that came out of that I just want to say publicly for everybody to hear is that when you have the automated EHR software and you send like a message to a client that says, you know, your appointment is coming or fill out this paperwork, clients sometimes respond to that thinking you are going to get that reply. And then there were some issues where a client got very disgruntled because a clinician was not replying to their request that they had sent via email. But what happened is that was an auto-generated message, and it did not say in the message to the client, I can't receive replies to this. So just a heads up for all clinicians out there who use an EHR system, if it's an automated message, it should say in there somewhere, don't reply to this, I won't get it, just so the client is aware of that. But otherwise, I thought it was very productive and appreciated the opportunity to look at the cases.
10B is report from the Licensing Standards Committee Chair, which is me. We did not meet, so I do not have a report. The report C is the Outreach Committee. We did meet, but it was like 10 minutes. Basically, we met long enough to go, we have nothing to talk about. So I don't know. So we technically met, but we didn't do anything.
Good meeting.
Yeah,
Good
it was a good
meeting.
meeting. The Outreach Committee, though, since we are all here, I do think I would like for us to schedule a meeting sometime the next couple of weeks or the next month or so. There's 2 things that we do need to talk about in the Outreach Committee. One is Ms. Smith was able to prepare for us some documents related to the differences between coaching and licensure for us to consider posting on our website. And so we need to just meet and review those documents. Also, we have a lunch and learn that's coming up in September. And so we need to kind of set the agenda for our lunch and learn. I'm trying to think, at our last meeting, we had talked about using this lunch and learn in maybe 2 different ways. One way was either as a, to talk about maybe some of the rules changes that were potentially coming up. So the rules changes that we're going to talk about today. Or to use this maybe as like a listening session where licensees or the public or supervisors or whomever could maybe give us some feedback about barriers to licensure in Texas and how to, you know, if there are ideas or solutions about how to address some of those barriers. So if anybody has any thoughts or feedback on that, we can open up the discussion right now.
Dr. Merchant, I must say that I attended the last lunch and learn this week, and most of the folks from the staff, Daryl Speaks, Tim Spear, Sarah, and Attorney Patrick were on it, and he allowed, after briefing us, Daryl Speaks on the overall picture, the various representatives, division heads, if I'm correct. Sarah did an outstanding job twice to represent 2 boards, then Diane for social work, I think, and then LPC. And so Daryl went over a lot of the changes and the policies and the legislative proposed legislation, the legislation that may or may not impact us as practitioners, but in other fields. So I thought it was very good. Also got 1 hour of credit CEU toward ethics, which was good. Although I felt I should have gotten 2, but they did an outstanding job. Sarah, everybody, you were clear as mud on your explanations. And I'm saying that for a reason, they know why, but it's a good opportunity for board members and practitioners to go on, you get a CEU, and you get the latest information that the staff members, particularly as being a legislative year, clued you in on and educating you in on what is going on and how that's impacted. So I'll yield there, but I thought it was a very good way, Madam Chair, for anyone, particularly us practitioners or general public members, to learn what's going on legislative wise and in the field. And what the other BHAC members are doing, social workers, psychologists, and officers.
Yes, Dr. O.
So I would echo Chaplain Stoglin's comments and compliments to the board BHEC staff about how wonderful that lunch and learn was. In addition, just to kind of talk about our plans for lunch and learn, I'm wondering, can we do both? Can we do just a brief update period and then open up for feedback so that we're meeting both of those needs during that meeting?
Yeah, I think so. It's an hour-long meeting. We spend the first half talking about upcoming rules, so that maybe they would go out and make public comment. And then we could spend the other half doing, what do we need to hear? Another idea that I had, AMF TRB is doing a focus group, and I wondered maybe if that's something that we should think about doing also. So instead of just doing a lunch and learn, actually putting together like a focus group, and we invite people to come and tell us about their experience with licensure. I don't know. That was an idea I had yesterday. So.
Well, I mean, I think the edict of the Uvalde report has been remove barriers. And so how can we remove them if we don't know what they are? So I think the focus group would really, number one, show the legislature we have done our due diligence, but also help us to hone our efforts so that we're being productive and fruitful.
And the only thing I would add to that is, Dr. Merchant, see if we can run through Darrell and all of that, see if we can get the CEUs, which will further incentivize not only our practitioners, but others.
Yeah.
And now that we require 3 hours of crisis management training as part of our CEU.
Do we? Oh, did
Yes.
that pass? I didn't think that passed.
Did that pass? I thought we did. Okay, we recommended it. It's like we recommended the 3 hours of crisis management, but that didn't pass. Darrell, can you help us out on that? Or Sarah?
No, I don't think we have anything like that in the rules right now, Chaplain.
Okay, we had talked about it.
Well, there-
Yes, yeah, it has been talked about. I even think maybe at the legislative level as well.
At the legislative level, there was, I think it was just 1 hour of CEUs was proposed, but it
Didn't pass.
didn't pass. And so I was actually going to bring that up later.
Okay.
As well.
I'll yield to that.
Yeah.
Let wait on you.
I will say, Madam Chair, Chaplain Stoglin, you guys can assign whatever amount of CEs to your presentations that you want. Well, I mean, as long as you don't give 5 hours for a 2-hour presentation, but y'all are free to set the number of hours on your CE programs.
I think we've done that in the past. We've done the lunch and learns before. I think we've given an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, well then I think that I'll task the outreach committee with just discussing how the format of the lunch and learn will go, and maybe even throwing out the idea of perhaps doing some sort of focus group as well. So, okay, agenda item number D, report from the professional development committee. This is Husband Thompson. That is you.
We haven't met since the last time, so.
Okay. Let's see here. Actually, I do, well, do we have the JP exam? We have the JP exam as another agenda item, right? Okay, I'll talk about that then. Mrs. Smith, did you have your hand raised? Okay, yes.
I
ma'am.
do. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Merchant. I do have my hand raised. I believe I thought I heard you say, since the members of the outreach committee were there, you wanted to set a date for us to meet. Did you want to go ahead and do that before you move on to in your agenda?
Yes, please, thank you. Okay. Do y'all want to meet sometime in August, or do you want to meet early September?
I say August.
August?
I would say August, if we're going to be planning things to do for our lunch and learn. So that would be my preference.
After the 21st, when the kids are back at school.
Okay. I didn't have to put my calendar on my laptop. Okay, so
So maybe the week of the 21st to the 25th, sometime that week.
yes, I could do either Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. Or late Friday afternoon.
I can do any of those 3 afternoons.
You said Thursday afternoon? Thursday or Friday?
Thursday.
Thursday. Okay, how about, can we do Thursday at either 2 or 3? 2? Okay, Thursday at 2 then.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So to clarify, what I heard was August 24th, Thursday, August 24th at 2 p.m. for outreach committee meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Chair Merchant, I'll also send my questions to our lawyer, Patrick Hyde, to give us feedback on the questions that I had concerning what we might want to put on the website. So I'll have that for us when we meet.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number E, report from the Rules Committee.
Yeah, we've got, this is gonna be fun. We met on the 16th and we dealt with 3 or 4, I think, some interesting and significant changes that are directly related to the mandate from Uvalde as far as greater access and fast tracking without sacrificing the quality of our training and the expertise in what we have. So the first one is that licensing standard committees discuss possibility increasing maximum number of supervisees, eliminating maximum completely with this. And the psychologist board has their approach is not limiting to a number right now. We limit to 12 number of supervisees. The committee is going to recommend that we follow along with the psychology board and use their phrasing that says supervisors may only supervise the number of individuals for which they can provide adequate supervision and to remove the numerical limitation.
Do you all want to go ahead and discuss this, or do you want to give your report and then we can discuss? Like, do you just want to give us a report, or do you want us to go move ahead and move on to 11, start having a conversation?
I just assume drill down with this one.
Okay.
And then take the next item. Next item, is that agreeable, or do you want to do the whole thing?
That's fine.
Doesn't matter to me. Okay.
So basically, what we're talking about, it's on here. It's agenda item 11D. 2, supervisors may only supervise a number of individuals for which they can provide adequate supervision. So removing that numerical number of 12. Is there any discussion or questions over E2?
LPCs, there's no limit. Social work, or I'm not sure what the social work limit was. I don't recall off the top of my head what that was. So, yeah, with that, like psychologist, there's no limit. We're the only ones that have a limit to that. And I think to expand opportunities for supervisors to provide supervision, that we remove that limitation.
I'm also thinking about rural communities. It was brought to my attention not too long ago that even in Abilene, we have several people who are listed as elementary supervisors, but like only like 3 people are actually doing supervision in Abilene. Everybody else is, they might supervise, for people in their institution, but they're not going to supervise just, you know what I mean? Anybody. And so it's like, anyway, so yeah, so I support this move to just getting rid of the number and letting people supervise as many as they feel like they can adequately provide supervision.
It provides flexibility.
Yeah, it does. And given that I do think that we have supervision, I don't know that I don't feel like there's enough supervisors to protect this. I think this will help maybe alleviate some of those problems. So.
Yeah. And given the fact that compared to the numbers, I know we're going to maybe talk about it, so other professions of BHEC, we don't have that many in the great state of Texas, LMFTs compared to other just LPCs, social workers and all of that. Our numbers are low compared to theirs. And that's okay, because I think Dr. Barty, Dr. Merchant, y'all are directly involved in university programs, and you understand why. We just cannot have everybody doing this, and then the citizens of which we are, of the great state of Texas, which we are sworn to protect, we can't defend that because we have enough charlatans and all this stuff going on that we don't need to further give them opportunities to do this. So I think in this case, low is okay.
Is there any other further discussion, or is there a motion on the table to accept this rule change?
I move that we accept this rule change.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous, so that passes.
Could you restate the motion, please? I couldn't understand it.
It is just to accept it, it's just to accept this rule change of the removing the numerical number of 12.
Okay.
To the adequate supervision, as it's worded in.
Yeah, to use the language that is in the report.
Thank you.
Okay, Russ, next one.
Attorney
Yeah.
Patrick?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So we're talking about D, there was also some other language in 801-143. And so I just didn't want to move on before we looked at that as well. If you wanted to take them separately or all together, I believe D5 in that was an addition on that one particular rule.
Hang on. So you're talking about on the agenda, you're talking about agenda item D1 or DI. The supervisor must maintain a complete supervision file. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Sorry. It sounded like you were voting on the rule, but I wanted to make you aware that there was another change in that rule.
Right. I think we're going to deal with those separately.
Okay,
So we can deal with that one now, though. So let's move on, Russ, to the supervisor must maintain a complete supervision file on the elementary associate.
Okay.
I guess one question.
Is that? Oh,
I guess one question I had about this particular rule change is we are talking about the supervision record and not client records, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yes, and that was just to make sure that that all of those rules are taken. We're talking about D. Is this is F3? Is that what you're talking about?
D1, DI.
On the agenda, it's DI. In the rule, it's 801.143D, I think.
But yes, is the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. 'Cause
So Sarah has it pulled up.
okay.
I think this rule makes sense because we have had cases on the License and Standards Committee where a supervisor has unfortunately died. And we have not been able to count any of the supervisee's hours because there's nobody to verify them. There were no records. There was nothing. And so to me, it makes sense that just like we have to be responsible for our client records and, ensuring that something happens to those after, we are die or incapacitated, it makes sense to me that we would also ask supervisors to do the same thing for supervisory records.
I'm sure there's no discussion. I'd like to offer a motion.
Second.
Any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of those changes to 801.143, that is unanimous. Okay, back to you, Russ. Which one do you want to tackle next?
Okay, let's do the the 500 rules to 750 for technology assisted services. Required 3,000 rules, the 500. Two different things that were driving this. One was the evolving to make greater access to rural services, to provide those out there and to not limit our offerings there. But the second was to start to stage ourselves for interstate for the compact as well. That was also a little bit part of the thinking there. So the recommendation is to increase the number of technology assisted hours from 500 to 750 as being allowed and permitted of the required 1,500 hours.
That makes sense to me too, going from 500, increasing the maximum from 500 hours to 750. I mean, they have to get 1,500 direct. This would be up to half the direct hours can be via telehealth.
And we didn't want to go more than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that people need in the room experience before we say that they are fully licensed and ready to practice independently. And so, yeah. What do the rest of y'all think? What are your thoughts? If any?
Well, I mean, I just think it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jody and then Janine.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Janine.
I just think that if we're supposed to be removing barriers to licensure,
Yeah.
this is one of those barriers. And I also think that I don't have any hesitation about increasing it to 750 because still half of their direct clinical experience has to be in person. So I feel like we're still safeguarding the citizens of Texas and developing, when you think about it, this new age of technology that we were catapulted into by the pandemic, we need clinicians to be prepared for that as well. So I think this does a fair job of preparing for both.
It's here to stay.
It's a nice center of that.
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Chair Merchant. I'm in favor of this, but I do have a question just for anybody that's out there listening, because I've got some students or supervisees that will be finishing toward the end of this year. They will have had an excess of the 500, which was governor approved when we were in state of emergency over COVID. So I'm just wanting to make sure that we're still going to count more for people that were underneath that area. This just effectively changes it in our rules going forward. Is that what the understanding is?
That's my understanding, because we still have that end rule that we can, the staff of the board can make exceptions based on things like governor declared emergency. So yes, we would still be able to, if somebody got 1,000 hours during COVID, then we would still be able to make those accommodations.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that for anybody that was listening.
I'm sure I'll make a motion.
Yes, thank you, George.
Second.
Got a second? Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, Russ, next.
Next in the definitions, 801.2, 13, I guess, the clarifying what is independent practice to make sure that people do not misunderstand much what that is. The difference between independent practice versus private practice has been toyed about and misunderstood. So recommending that we insert into our definitions independent practice, since it does specifically say that you cannot practice, you cannot have an independent practice, or using that same language. Practice of providing marriage and family therapy services to a client without the supervision of an LMFT supervisor.
Okay, I think I need somebody to explain to me again why we need this rule, or why do we need this definition?
It's my understanding there was some confusion when, particularly when the LPC change occurred, that LPC associates can now go into private practice. Okay. So then there's this confusion over independent versus private practice. And when the word independent practice was used, I think there was an assumption, oh, I don't need supervision because I'm in private practice. And so clarifying the distinction, you can be in private practice, but you cannot be an independent practice until you've done your supervised hours. I think that was part of it.
But that's for the LPCs.
But because we have that same kind of structure in place, I think it created some confusion in our role as well.
I guess I don't. Okay, so when I was looking at the rules, the only place that I can find independent practice is the place that Sarah just had on the screen. But I guess I feel like if we change that to private practice, then I don't know that we even have independent practice anywhere else in our rules. Janine, I'm sorry, Ms. Smith, did you have a comment?
I'm not in favor of this rule. To me, it feels like we've muddied it more than we've clarified it. Now I'm worried about supervisees that are working within a private practice of other to me, I think it makes it, I don't know if we remedied this. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents out there that I'm not in support of this rule. I think this needs to go back to the drawing board a little bit more. I found it muddy when I was trying to read through it. And I feel like that those of us on the board are pretty knowledgeable with what all the words mean, but I found it muddied it more than it clarified it. Just my 2 cents.
Other
For the
discuss-
board's consideration, I've displayed 801.43C as in Charlie 2. That was recently added. An LMFT associate must not represent themselves as an independent practitioner and must, the associate's name must be followed by the supervised by with the supervisor's name. So here we've used independent practitioner. And in the other section that's up for review, for discussion today was in 801.48. And that also used, it currently uses independent practice. In independent practicee, the licensee must establish a plan for custody and control of the licensee's records. Since the associates can own and operate their own private practice, but they are not independent, they are being supervised. I had some questions from the associates about, so I don't have to do anything with my client records, or does that mean I can no longer run my private practice? And so I was getting inquiries about what did the rules mean? And so that's how this conversation got started.
I see, I like changing this to private, because private practice encompasses more than just the word independent. But I feel like if we were to change that word independent to private, that I feel like, I don't know, I'm just not sure then that we need a definition of independent practice, because the only other place that it talks about it is in that when we talk about independent practitioners. I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. So I'm also, if the board feels like, or if the board or staff feels like this is somehow helpful for them, then, you know, I could be swayed, but,
One thing, Sarah, can you bring that rule up that talked about changing it from independent to private practice? I hate writing rules in a meeting. It's never really a good idea, but instead of saying in private or independent practice, what if you just said a licensee?
Because in the sections that are above it, it talks about when the licensee is employed by someone else, then the
Okay,
employer, et cetera.
I got you. Yeah,
That
Never
was
mind.
Attorney Hyde's first recommendation, was just to say a licensee, but then we looked at the other sections and said, oops.
then y'all smartened him up. Okay. And I came along and fell into the same dumb pit he did. So, okay.
I personally like the distinction between independent and private. I mean, I don't know, in my mind, it clarifies. It could be what Mrs. Smith indicated, which is I'm just part of this board and I know this lingo. But for me, having a definition there that clarifies the difference between private practice, which we all know, and independent practice, that in my mind would make it very clear to an associate and a supervisor that they can't practice on their own if they're an associate, but they can do private practice. And if they're in private practice, they need to be making sure there's a chain of custody for their records.
I think it needs to be clarified. It's still muddy. I agree with Ms. Smith because it's almost like, well, what do I do? It's almost like conflicting within a confliction, so to speak. And I think we probably need to maybe go back a little bit to the drawing board and see before we vote on it. Madam Chair, is my recommendation, table it.
I think we can like make a decision today.
You
Sarah, could you put the definition back up again? So that we can stare at it?
Or do we need to wordsmith it a little bit, Madam Chair, to make it a little clearer? Or
I guess, I mean, like, I think the word independent, I think the definition of independent practice is totally fine. Like, I think the definition makes sense. I'm just, if the only other time, I mean, the only other time if we change the word independent to private, that other section, which I really do think we need to do. Because regardless of whether you're an LMFT associate or you're an LMFT, you need to be maintaining your own records if you're in private practice. But then there's no other place in the rules where it talks about independent practice and using those words except where it says if you're an independent practitioner, you cannot represent yourself as an independent practitioner. And so, but again, I just don't see the need for it, but I'm also though open to the will of the board, to the will of staff. So,
Well, Daryl or Sarah, what do y'all, or Patrick, what do y'all think, as we deal with this? Do we need to wordsmith it, lessen it? Do we need to make it a little clearer?
let me hear what Mr. Francis has to say.
Actually, I just had something that's not something we often have the opportunity to do. We have people here in the practice. I would like to hear from them. I know it's not our normal practice, or don't use this word practice. But just to see if it clarifies to them or if it confuses them. Just some outside.
No pressure, but what do you think?
The state is listening, no question. You have to speak up so they can hear you.
Or come to the mic.
Mike, they need to hear you as a state.
Does the mic actually work?
This one.
You have to come to the mic.
You got to see later.
Should be working.
I personally actually agree with Dr. Martin saying that the independent practice and private practice, like clarified, like particularly that second part where it said like you scratched out the independent and changed it to private practice, just because it explained like that you can be in a private practice, but you really need to keep like that custody of those records. Something like that really needs to be clarified. The first part where it said like independent practice, I feel like it's something maybe in the definition is maybe missing just for me personally. But just when it was explained that you can work without the supervision of elementary supervisor, but maybe it's like just to add another word there saying like when you're fully licensed or something. Just I felt like in the first one maybe a word was missing or something was missing.
Yeah.
To further clarify that.
I'm sorry, I can hear that you're speaking, but I can't understand the words that you're saying.
I think that mic is not working. If you'll come up over here.
I apologize.
That
I'd
might
like to summarize.
Yeah, I can also just summarize. She agreed with the idea of taking out independent and using practice or private, but she felt like maybe the definition was missing something, especially in terms of like, maybe full licensure or, just didn't quite clarify you have to be fully licensed or to practice independent. Did I summarize that right? Okay.
Do you have anything to say on
I'm not licensed.
this? Okay. You can read, we actually.
I'm PC, not MFT.
Oh.
Well.
Okay.
Put the snacks back.
Mr. Hyde, let's hear what Mr. Hyde has to say.
Oh, I was just going to recommend, it sounds like there's not consensus on the 801.2 definition. So you may just recommend sending that back to the rules committee and they can look at it. I personally like the definition of independent practice just because it's being borrowed from LPC. And so that's verbatim, other than we swapped out LMFT for what the LPCS. But so there would be consistency, right, in those sort of definitions. But if the board's looking at it and saying they think there's some confusion about it, I think we could go back and take another look at it and see if we could come back with maybe a better definition later. If that seems like most everyone is saying. I would recommend moving forward with the 801.48H though, just because I think if you leave that in, it kind of doesn't, I think it's going to cause more confusion. And so we don't really have a definition for private practice or independent practice. And so we can do those later. I think fixing H is kind of the more urgent, I guess, change than the definition.
I agree. So let's talk about this 801.48H. This is striking the word independent, inserting the word private. Is there a motion well, first, is there any further discussion about that? Okay, then can I have does anybody like to make a motion? Okay, Russ makes a motion, and Dr. Elder seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of making this change? Okay, that is unanimous.
So I'm sorry, I'm not clear. Was the motion in regard to the definition in 801.2, or was the motion in regard to 801.48?
801.48H.
Okay,
Record keeping.
so do we need a motion to table 801.2?
We're gonna talk about that right now.
Okay, thank you.
So regarding adding the definition, do y'all want to, does somebody want, do we want to table it, or do we just want to
Yes.
vote on it?
I'd say table.
What happened? What are the implications of tabling it? We just go back to rules?
Yes.
If we vote, it's up or down and that's it instead. Say we table it.
Knowing the rules is probably going to say,
We
okay,
like it.
let's repurpose it and we'll resubmit it.
See, that's
Because,
where the rules
because
members are
we like
here.
this. The
Exactly.
rules committee, like,
That's
this is
true.
the rules committee's recommendation. So to send it back to rules to tweak or whatever it is. Now, we can use words like fully licensed, but I even think that's a little bit vague. Because an associate may consider themselves kind of, they're licensed. But fully licensed, and that was.
Ms. Fassel, can you put it back on screen, please, ma'am?
Yes,
Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, thank you.
I know.
Okay, well then, does somebody want to make a motion about adopting the definition of independent practice?
As a member of the Rules Committee and having voted on this, I make a motion that we accept the language.
All those in favor?
Well, wait.
Wait,
now
wait,
we-
wait,
now it's discussion.
Sorry, any further discussion?
Rule, Robert.
Yeah,
So Madam Chair, since the Rules Committee is here, then Attorney Hyde said they can go, if you table it, they can go back and maybe it's worse, but maybe give a second look at it. Just to see.
I don't feel like the definition itself needs to be wordsmithed.
Well, do you think it'll cause confusion for those? I think here we've discussed it and we have some context, but others. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Francis.
Madam Chair, I think this is actually one of the few times where the practitioners need to have more of a say than the lay members, only because it's something that's worked on a regular basis where we just see it here. You actually live it on a daily basis. So I would,
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, I don't want to speak for you, but I think staff would also, this would give them more clarity for the questions, because y'all field questions on ambiguities about private practice, independent practice, those types of things. And I think this would be a line item that can be pointed back to, that could maybe alleviate some of the conversations.
I would agree with that statement.
So this would be helpful. Okay.
Is there any further discussion before we take a vote? Okay, all those in favor of adopting this definition, say, raise their hand. All those opposed? All those abstaining? I don't know.
that's good. We rarely have members saying.
I know.
So it's,
Yeah,
Mixing it up.
we're mixing it up. today.
Okay.
Well, wait,
Spicy.
did
Well, and I think Janine also.
Ms. Smith,
abstained.
did you abstain?
Yeah, so
Yes,
yes,
okay.
we abstained.
Okay.
Okay.
Sarah, did you get who made the motion in second?
I did not.
George made the motion, Russ seconded.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And I will just say for the record, on the previous vote, it was not unanimous because I'm abstaining on the previous vote as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janine.
It's okay. Believe me, the way we're having to do this today, that's okay. I just wanted to have that on the record for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what else? I do think there's another item that we need to discuss from the Rules Committee report.
This on the 2-year jurisdiction.
Yes.
This was a legislative driven dynamic. I mean, we could not go further until we heard from legislature.
I have questions about that. That makes no sense to me because we changed this rule like 5 years ago. So why would we not be able to change it now? Patrick, or Mr. Hyde, Attorney Hyde,
Which rule are you speaking about? Sorry.
801.142.9B. Licensed in another jurisdiction, 2 years.
I have it up.
And at the time we were looking at that, Attorney Hyde, you were going to review statutory authority to support the rule change.
I know that the bill that was presented that I think passed the House but didn't pass the Senate would have allowed this specifically. And I'd have to go back and look at chapter 502 specifically, but I can't remember if it was changing it to 1 year or if it was just licensed or if it was 2 years, because was it 3, Sarah?
It was 0. It was
Oh,
none.
0. Yeah, it was changing it to 0. So because they had provisions for social work, for LPC and for MFT in that bill, and we were hopeful that that would pass, and it did not, which is really unfortunate. So I'd have to look. So we can't go any lower than what the statute would allow us to do. And I have to go back and look at the statute, but I think the statute allows for 2 years, and so that's probably why that 2-year is there.
Attorney Hyde, I would add that based on our discussion in the Rules Committee meeting in June, you had cited 502.252, and you had said that statute sets a 2-year minimum, and that is why we were not able to amend it.
Sarah, can you pull that up? 502?
Yes.
252, 502.252.
Like 252.
I didn't see anything in 252 that authorizes that.
No, C2.
Has completed 2
two,
years of work
C2.
experience. Yeah.
C2.
That's what she would agree.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
But I feel like that wouldn't matter because if somebody has been fully licensed in another jurisdiction for 1 year, I mean, they're fully licensed. You know? So
Exactly, even if they're coming from out of state, because it doesn't say within this state.
What is that yellow right there? Be licensed in good standing as a married parent in another state. I can't read it.
Another state.
Nothing in here.
This is different. I'm gonna go back to the 252.
I think you're right. That 2 years has to do with the associate phase, not the fully licensed.
Not the fully licensed phase.
Whoops.
Because I think that the whole package for the legislation was talking about the provisional license and not an associate license. So I feel like we need to look at the statute on the provisional piece. Because we were trying to do away with some, and from my understanding, they were trying to do away with some of those barriers so that people could come in to our state to practice, and it wouldn't be a provisional license per se. They would be a licensee in good standing.
That is right. We were looking at doing away with the provisional license because we don't use it.
It was original, my understanding is it was originally in there for people who hadn't yet taken the licensing exam when Texas offered the exam twice a year. And since we use the national AMFTRB exam, this is rarely I don't even remember if we've done one since I've been here.
I think my recommendation then would be the rules committee needs to have a meeting fairly soon anyways. I'm going to talk about some things in my board report to ask the rules committee to address. And so perhaps the rules committee can go back at that time and also look at 801.1429B and see if we could maybe perhaps reduce that 2 years down to 1 year. And that'll hopefully give Attorney Hyde an opportunity to maybe look through the statute and make sure that we really could reduce it to 1 year. Attorney Hyde, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you were saying send it back to the rules committee so we can look at it. I was just gonna say, I know that the legislation took that provisional statute and did a lot of strike throughs and basically called it out of state licensees. And so it made a lot of the changes that we were really hoping for, so that when somebody's licensed in another state, they can come in a lot faster. So I think, and we'll discuss this in the rules committee a little further and come back to the next board meeting, but I think that the 502.252 C2 talks about you have to be practicing for after the degree, you have to have 2 years of practice. And so I think that's what that rule is leaning on, to say, well, you've been licensed in good standing for 2 years, you've sort of de facto met that 2 years of requirement that you be licensed for 2 years before you can upgrade to the full licensure. But I'll take a closer look at that to make sure that we're on solid footing. But I think that's where that comes from. That's where that 2 years comes from.
Well, I think, so when the board considered this the first time, so it used to be 5 years. So up until probably about 5 or 6 years ago, you had to be licensed in another jurisdiction for 5 years. And in an effort to make it easier for people to come in and to make it easier on staff, that's when they reduced it to 2 years. And I remember having a conversation with Jennifer Smotherman at the time, and actually you were on the board, so maybe you can speak to this better than I can. That part of that, but the part of that was that the reason they chose 2 is because it still came up to, at least 1 year in your master's program, seeing clients, at least 2 years of postgraduate experience, and then another 2 years, so you're still looking at 5 years, So I don't know. I don't remember the provisional license being a part of that discussion, but I technically wasn't on the board then. That was right. I mean, we voted on it, I think, right as I came onto the board.
It wasn't about provisional license.
No, yeah.
Not at all. And the thought was that those years were accumulated through those various practices. And so we had a number in there that was nonsensical.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was already getting met. And so it was seen as a barrier versus access.
Right.
That's my movement.
And I was on the board then. And what was happening is that then Madam Chair Smotherman had called California, if you remember this, Ms. Francis, and they were trying to figure out how they counted their hours. Madam Chair. And they double count. So if you took a course in our state, great state of Texas, it was 3 hours, you remember? And then Evelyn, you were on this. And so they would say 6 hours. And so she was saying, well, how do you reconcile that? And the person with whom she spoke said, I can't explain it in writing, but if you call me, I'll talk to you. This was an actual reply. And we were going like, this makes no sense. And how can we protect the citizens of the great state of Texas when the state of California, which we were talking about at the time, couldn't even describe to us how they broke their numbers down, how they certified their own people, and you asking us to give you automatic acceptance, and we couldn't do it because you didn't even explain how you got your people through. And so that caused a series of confusing signals, and I think that's where we are now. And Sarah, you were obviously our person in. This is a little bit before Daryl, you came and BHEC and all of that. And so that was, as I recall, the history of those conversations.
But it had nothing to do with provisional.
No, it had nothing to do with provisional. It was just trying to get LMFT practitioners from California, as an example, to here, and it was not clarified. Is that correct, Sarah? Am I on track, if memory serves, for that kind of those
That's mostly my recollection as well.
Ms. Smith?
And I believe that the original 5-year came from a task force that former Chair Smotherman was on with AMFTRB, or maybe AMFT.
AMFT.
And
Did you have more you want to say, Sarah?
no, that's it.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask the Rules Committee to go back for this particular rule to look at, because the bill passed in the House. It died in the Senate during a huge dying day, where a lot of bills died. So I would like the Rule Committee to go back and look at this definition that we have between provisional and other things, the 2-year, waving it down to 1, waving it down to 0, and look at, because the bill that was decided upon was agreed between social workers, LPCs, and LMFTs to make this kind of a little bit more uniform. And so I would like the Rules Committee to look at this bill and then look at what we have now and how close can we get to it? Because, as I said, it did pass in the House, it did die in the Senate, not for because it was a bad bill. It just died during an evening where a lot of bills died. So I would like to make that suggestion before we make a decision, so that they'll have all this information, have the bill and the background on how that bill was constructed in front of them, if they haven't already done so.
Mr.
Thank
Schultz?
you.
Ms. Smith, are you looking for the Rules Committee to look more at the language of that bill and look at an adoption of some of that language? Or are you looking more at the time frame reference of that bill in terms of I see that, I don't know which.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. I would like for them to look at the time frame of that bill and what they were actually talking about within that bill. I don't know if they've already done that, but seeing as that the bill was created, the bill went up to the legislature. It had agreement from the other working boards with all the different things. It was a large bill that wasn't just an MFT bill. It encompassed all the mental health professions. And that way they can look at it, they can compare, they can see, even though our board and what I feel like we do is unique. I also feel like it's better anyway, but I would like just to suggest that they take a look at that before and then make a recommendation to us based on that. That just in my suggestion.
Dr. Elder?
Okay, so I was on that Rules Committee when this was discussed, and I had done some research prior to that. I just want to put that research out here and get maybe the full board's thoughts on it before we go back to consider a separate Rule Committee. According to AMFT's model for MFT license portability, they're recommending 1 year. However, when I went back and looked at all 50 states and their rules and what they say as far as licensure portability, and 23 of the 50 states use the substantially equivalent language, which I know we're trying to get away from. And then 18 of the 50 states use 5 years, 4 states use 3 years, and then 3 states use 2 years, 2 states use 1 year, and there's only 1 state that says 0 years. So I'm curious, a bigger picture, if we move to 1 year, how does that impact our portability with the majority of the other states that use more than 1 year?
I think it could affect our portability. If you're talking about if somebody comes to Texas and leaves Texas, is that what you mean?
Right, and also, well, I mean, I guess them coming to us, they can come easier than we can go to them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's a one-way street. What you're talking about is something called licensure by endorsement, and that's what House Bill 1167 and House Bill 4075 were really designed to standardize and streamline to the greatest degree possible. this number that we're talking about only affects inbound traffic. You cannot, there is nothing that any of you can do or even the legislature can do short of joining a compact that will control the acceptability of MFTs trained and brought up here in Texas and other jurisdictions. So we're just really talking about the acceptability of inbound, the education and training of inbound traffic here.
Thank you.
Which defeats the purpose. Defeats the purpose.
Maybe we could just be a leader in the field and set it at one and go, hey, everybody, don't you want to get on board with us? Look how much it's benefited us. And, you know, yeah.
Publicly shame them.
Yeah.
That's what you do. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you do.
And I think it was also to because MFT, as we saw in further on in the discussion that we'll have later, we do have the smallest numbers. We don't have we're not graduating at the same rate as other licenses are. We have schools that are not continuing their MFT program in the state of Texas. So this was to try and also keep our MFTs on the same footing as an LPC or a social worker. And that was another rationale behind making it that difference.
Okay, so is there any further discussion before we ask the Rules Committee to take up changes to 801.14290? Okay, then Rules Committee, y'all understand, y'all have any questions about taking this back and discussing it?
You know, I don't think it's going to be helpful.
I think so too. Okay. Is there any other items from the Rules Committee meeting that we need to discuss? Dr. Burton?
I think that.
Okay. Whew, okay, well then we just made it all the way through
Yes.
10E and through agenda item number 11, which means we're on to agenda item number 12, discussion of possible action regarding the jurisprudence exam. I do have a couple of comments here, but before I have my comments, does anybody else have discussion that they'd like to throw out? Go ahead. Yes, Dr. Ellen.
So I just want to say thank you to Mrs. Bashold for her meticulous response to all of the comments. I really appreciate you so thoroughly reviewing their exams and making sure that we are offering a fair exam.
Here, here.
Thank you.
I just had two comments. Comment number one was regarding the 2 additional questions that were proposed or added to the jurisprudence exam. I'll be honest, I don't think that we need those questions. I think that they're kind of getting down into the weeds into things that maybe our licensees, they pertain to very specific situations. Like, I'm just not sure that we need those 2 additional questions. That's my opinion. Any discussion, comment,
Here, here.
disagreement?
Concur.
This is a non-fail test.
Yeah.
So,
It is. But still, like, I don't know. I would rather the licensees be reading about other things. These just seem like very specific. Yeah, exactly.
So you'd like to remove those 2 questions?
I would recommend that we remove those 2 questions. Any disagreement or discussion, or
Said enough?
do we need to vote
Is
on
that
that?
the-
Or
yeah, is that the motion?
does it take a motion, or can we just?
Can we just?
So those aren't new questions. Those were questions that are already in. So they were looked at when the Professional Development Committee reviewed it back in December.
Okay.
But I'm here to facilitate what the board would like to do, so.
I think it's just a matter of you providing direction to.
Then I would just, yeah, let's go ahead and nix those 2 questions. The other comment that I just had is double negatives are difficult for people to answer. And so we don't have to make any changes now, but the next time that we do an overhaul, let's maybe try to get rid of some of those double negatives. Because even though it is a no-fail exam, it's just still, whenever you're staring at the question, I don't know, it's still complicated. So I would just say in the future, let's try to get rid of as many double negatives as possible.
I do not agree.
That was nice. That was good.
Okay, any other discussion on agenda item number 12? Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 13. Oh, that's me, report from the board chair. Okay, first thing I want to say is the AMFTRB focus group is moving forward. We had talked about this briefly last session, and Dr. Barty, Dr. Elder, y'all both expressed interest in being on those focus groups. And I did get permission for both of y'all to be on the focus groups. AMFTRB is actually going to do 3 different focus groups. The first focus group is going to be for supervisors. And then the second focus group is going to be for regulators. And then the third focus group is going to be for LMFT associates. So Dr. Barty, Dr. Elder, which focus group do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the supervisors or the regulators?
Oh, you want to be a regular.
I'm going regulator. You're going supervisor?
I was gonna go supervisor.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would
Could I be
Sarah?
a super regulator?
We already are super regulator.
Oh, God.
Haha.
Have the minutes, please.
Okay, but somebody needs to write that down and remind me, so. I
I'll
can
send you an email
Send me
right
an
now.
email. Yeah, send me an
Okay.
email.
Got it.
Okay. Next thing is, speaking of, we had several bills, like y'all remember, there were several bills that I brought to the last meeting that we were tracking. All the bills failed. As we talked about earlier, they all died on that bloody Monday or Sunday or whatever it was. Anyways, one of the bills that failed was on suicide prevention, about requiring providers to have 1 hour of suicide prevention as a part of their CEs. That is something else I would like. Would that go to the licensing and standards committee, or would that go to the rules committee?
But why do we need? Why can't we just decide that? We can decide what.
Can we just decide?
Yeah.
Would that have to go to a committee first?
Okay, hold on.
We can check, but I thought.
No, I'm not
that's
opposed to
the
that. I'm
portion.
saying,
Oh, I'm not
this-
saying that we should. I'm saying that we don't have to
Oh.
go to committee to decide that.
sure,
Yeah.
agreed,
Okay,
agreed,
That's all
100%.
I'm
I'm
saying.
not objecting to what you're saying. I'm saying the standardization work group worked extremely hard to standardize CE requirements, and we're gonna undo that if we add it.
Well, the other thing is, I don't know if we can vote on something that's not on the agenda. That might be the other issue. But I guess, anyways, I would like to maybe see us add a 1 hour CE, and since we're crisis management, it would include things like recognizing client deterioration, suicidal, how to do a safety plan, suicide prevention. Again, thinking about Uvalde and just the ways that we can maybe recognize signs of, or even going back to what happened at Fort Hood, just being able to recognize signs of deterioration in the future. Yes.
Ms. Smith, has that been discussed at all in the committee to standardize across? Has that come up at all by chance?
Currently, there is a group that is really pushing for the suicide, but as far as adding that in, we're just starting to talk about it. I don't actually really have much to report from BHAC when it does get around to me, because we were kind of waiting to see what the legislature did. So we didn't have much new in May. Right now, the crisis, an hour of crisis management is a trickle down that is being looked at. I think that, I don't want to, how do I say this? I think that continuing to tell people this is what you have to do for your CEUs, all of a sudden we're going to have almost all of our CEUs dictated by one thing or another, whether it's cultural competency or it's crisis or it's this or it's that, ethics. So it's being talked about, but no big decisions to push it one way or the other currently. That was a long answer for that one short thing. Sorry, George. Should have just said
It's
no.
the other way around, Ms. Smith, where I take the long portion and you take the short portion. So I appreciate that switching roles. I feel good about that.
I should have just said no.
In regard to procedure, if you want to vote on this, you would have to put it on a future board agenda. Because right now you're under the chair's report, and that doesn't give, to my mind, doesn't give the public enough notice about what we're going to talk about. if you're going to vote for a rule change at this time. Am I correct, Attorney Patrick?
We're in agreement.
Yeah.
Mr. Francis?
What I was trying to show and say is that the other organizations are also looking at the same thing. And so I think there's probably some ability. But I think the appropriate way is to go through the committee and have everyone do that.
I'd like to remind the board members that when you're speaking to each other, you can hear each other. So try to speak like you're talking to someone across from the room so that we can hear you as well.
I've never been accused of being soft-spoken.
Until now.
Just have.
Yeah.
If you want to say I'm also fit, I would love that comment next.
Spelt.
Keep them coming.
Okay, so it
I
sounds,
will,
oh, go ahead.
I would, let me interrupt just a second. I will tell you that our next BHEC meeting is August the 15th. And I am more than happy to listen in and ask about that and be able to report back to you guys regarding that issue. If we want to wait to talk about this further.
Dr. Elder?
Might I propose that we send this to the Professional Development Committee and have that meeting be held after Mrs. Smith is able to report back from her BHEC meeting in March 15th?
That sounds great.
Good governance.
Okay. Okay, next thing is, let's see here, a couple on the list. So the next thing is about the appointments. So there's still no word. I'm sorry, guys. There's still no word about appointments. I did a new appointments manager has been appointed. And so the appointments manager did email me and introduce himself, and he said he'd be in contact with me in the next few weeks to talk about future appointments. So I do think there is finally some movement. So yes, so stand by.
So it sounds like our contribution for bribe to keep them is working. So well done. Just kidding. Let me go on record. Just kidding. No bribe.
We
And
really
you
are
saw
going
Daryl. Daryl is literally right below me on the squares, Hollywood squares, and he had just a
Eyes
little
got
bit.
big.
Just a little
I
bit.
was trying to keep my poker face on as best I could, but I was like, please put a caveat after that statement, Janine, please.
Daryl, it didn't work that time because I think it caught you flat-footed there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you have a tell.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
All right, okay.
Okay, next thing is, we need to talk about the TCA meeting. TCA is going to be the Texas Counseling Association. They're having their annual meeting in November. Thank you, November 1st to 3rd in Houston. Dr. Elder has said that she would be happy to attend that meeting on our behalf and do a presentation. So,
You want to come too? We're such a good show together.
Wow.
Anybody else? I mean, looks good on your
Maybe, yeah.
senior application. Yeah.
Houston?
I know. it's
I love
amazing.
Houston.
It's
I love
amazing.
Houston. Anybody?
Yeah.
Houston's great.
would
Okay.
you want to?
You're there?
Where is it?
It's in the Greater Houston Metroplex. Let me find that for you.
Conference Center of.
So the presentation is going to be on,
Well, it would be November 3rd at 12:30 PM. And they have asked that a representative from our board attend. So I've gotten special permission from my university to teach virtually that morning, so I can walk straight out of class into the presentation, but I'd love to have you join. Yeah. Okay.
excellent. Okay. TAMFT will also be in April this year. I plan to speak on that, but if anybody wants to join me, you're welcome to do that. AMFTRB is coming up in September. I will be attending the AMFTRB meeting, and we should know next week whether or not Jody was elected to the AMFTRB board. Anyways, so we'll find out next week whether or not she's gonna be in present with us as well. And I believe that Mr. Spinks is going to be at AMFTRB as well.
Where are these held?
AMFTRB is going to be in Salt Lake City, Utah.
What?
Yeah. TMFT is going to be in San Antonio. We also need to talk about the September meeting location.
I have reached out to SMU to see if they would be willing to host, but I haven't heard back.
So we've reached out to SMU, or Dr. Elder has, and hopefully that will be a go. If it's not, then we can always meet in Abilene at HCU. HCU is always willing to host. The problem with HCU is it's a really long way for everybody but me. So anyway, so yeah. Well, so anyways, we'll see if we can do SMU. If that doesn't work, then we'll in September we'll meet at HCU in Abilene. I'm just curious, Mr. Spinks, what is there what needs to happen? Two things. What needs to happen in order for us to be able to meet in Austin? And what needs to happen in order for staff to be able to attend in person?
Meeting in Austin is just finding, either finding a location, because right now the big board meeting room that we have here in the Bush Building is not operational. The smaller meeting rooms are operational, but you wouldn't have as much room as what you have right there. I can tell in the small meeting rooms we have now, the shared conference rooms.
What is the
We don't yet know when the big fancy smancy boardroom is going to be operational. They just haven't told us. Staff, we just really didn't budget for staff to do any of the traveling. And quite frankly, I'm a little hesitant to have staff travel away, because technologically, if something goes wrong, I need them here where our IT staff can work with them here if possible. So I'm a little hesitant on that side. Plus it really kind of disrupts their day. It's
my day's not
easier
at all,
to
so-
get them back in the mix quicker whenever they're here.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Spinks, why
Yes.
can we not work with another agency or organization to use their conference room in Austin?
We can.
I mean, I think that's
It-
what-
Well, I guess if we met in Austin at a building, 4 blocks away, would staff be able to attend? Like, if the meeting was in Austin, would staff be able to attend it, or can they only attend if we're actually in the building and staff?
No, I mean, if it's in Austin, we can be physically present there.
We'd have to pay for that. We'd have to pay for a hotel.
No,
conference
there
room.
are other conferences. We just have to work with that agency or organization to use their conference room, schedule that time.
Lots of churches.
Yeah.
Because I miss having y'all here. Like, I just miss y'all, and
The social work board did work with TDLR and held a meeting there. They used WebEx instead of Zoom. So there was some technical adjustments to be made. And I believe there was some difficulty in the recording, getting that out of their cloud and into something that we could use and post. And this board used to meet at places like the Stephen F. Austin building or the Travis building, but that was before we were broadcasting, and those buildings didn't have any technology.
But I would agree, now that there's more agreeable leadership in TDLR instead of that other guy, maybe they'll work with us.
It's the TDLR facility, or what they call their North Campus, is set up for this type of a meeting. The problem is, outside of TDLR, what you're going to find, even if we're at the Capitol, is most of the buildings are set up to broadcast. They're not set up for incoming.
Not set up for TV.
Yeah, so hybrid meetings would be out. It's, allowing board members to telecast in, and there would be no opportunity for public comment in, which that's been one of the biggest boons of doing this, is you really expand the ability for public participation. You lose that.
Two things. One, I think our public number today is that number 16?
18.
So unfortunately, I don't know if it's, at first it was expanding, but I don't know what's happened in the last couple meetings. The numbers have gone down. But Madam Chair, it would be my recommendation that we ask staff to find a location, working with another agency or department, so that we can have the meeting in Austin at whatever meeting date you so desire.
Yes.
That
And
would be
just,
mine.
yeah. And just so that staff can attend. Like, I like
I would
meetings
agree with
where
you.
we're all staff to be here, so. Okay, so we will, for September, we're gonna continue to look into SMU, or perhaps ACU, and then thereafter, let's see if we can, Sarah, do you mind reaching out to TDLR and seeing if we can use their meeting space sometime after September?
I've made note.
Thank you. Okay.
This
the
is a
last-
long shot. No one would ever want to go up there, but would we ever want to go to Texas Tech? I know that's way up there, but they have such a beautiful facility and their program is so stellar for the MFT. I just want to make sure that they're being included or we reach out. I just wanted to throw their name out there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go to Texas Tech. It's my alma mater, number one. Yeah, there you go.
Several people.
Yeah, so I
Guns
totally concur that they make excellent NFTs. Anyways, and also it's only 2.5 hours from my house, so that's not. It's just the same as me going anywhere else. So yeah, I'm totally in support of that.
And that's really close to Colorado, right? So we could,
So
I
much
could just,
closer,
I could,
so much closer.
okay.
I'd have to fly.
I'm liking.
Okay, the last thing I have on my report from the board chair is regarding well, we just, okay, this is gonna take, actually, this might take a minute. So do we need a potty break?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, let's take a 10 minutes, 15 minutes? 10, let's take a 10-minute potty break and then we'll come back and resume.
Yes, it's
Potty break.
Potty break. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that a thing?
He's trying to help there. We're still there.
Switch it to the shorter bio. Do you have grandkids?
Well, y'all may want to turn off your mic or mute your mic. So
Yeah.
if you have a side conversation when you come back, it isn't broadcast.
Yes, thank you.
All right,
Go potty.
is it muted?
That was anyways, yeah.
Not yet.
Is it muted?
No, I can still hear you.
I think
You're
can click
muted.
the little mute button in the bottom.
Hmm.
Now you're muted. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I put it on my
We
list.
should be done.
Okay, welcome back from our break. Okay,
We don't have Miss Smith.
I'm sorry, what?
We
Sarah?
don't have Miss Smith.
Oh, we don't have a Smith.
No,
There's
there's
a
a
There she
potential.
is.
We have a
She was
quorum,
like, no, I'm here.
but we have a quorum.
Okay, you have another item.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna kind of give y'all some history, just so that y'all can kind of understand, and then we'll
Sure.
catch up with where we are currently. Okay, so as y'all know, there is a rule, oh, did I not write it down?
You have at least 4 people here who have these rules memorized.
I
so-
know, yeah, I gotta find it. Hang on. Sorry, I should have been.
Chair Merchant, is it 801-142?
I think so, 801.
Oh, you're better than Johnny Carson. Sorry, old reference.
Yes.
Here's Johnny. Read to the current.
Okay, yeah, so 801-142, under. Item number 4, and then we have A and B. And so this is regarding excess graduate internship hours. So currently, you can count 500 excess hours from a CAMT accredited program, 400 from a non-CAMT accredited program. These 2 rules have been on the books for a very long time. However, if you look at our statute, they are inconsistent with our statute. Our statute says that the 3,000 hours have to come after the receipt of a qualifying degree. And so technically, these 2 rules our rule is inconsistent with the statute. During our 4-year rule review, one of the things that has to happen in the 4-year rule review is both Mr. Spinks and Attorney Hyde have to certify the legality of our rules. And they, because there's this inconsistency, they cannot certify those 2 rules. Does that make sense? In other words, what that means is that if there's not a legislative fix, that these 2 rules could theoretically go away the next time we do our 4-year rule review. These rules are complicated. They're complicated for staff. It creates sometimes a burden trying to calculate these hour requirements. Also, just as an FYI. However, I think that these rules are incredibly beneficial. I think they aid licensure, because collecting those relational hours can be very difficult. And so consequently, I would like to find a solution to where we can retain these rules or retain the spirit of these rules, but retain them in such a way that doesn't also create a burden for staff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. There was a legislative fix that was proposed, but as you know, this legislative season, you all know how it went, and so consequently, the legislative fix that would have allowed us to retain these rules or to modify these rules, it didn't happen. And so, anyways, one of the things that when this first came to our attention a couple of years ago, Mr. Spinks reached out to the Office of the Attorney General for an opinion on what to do about this discrepancy. We received a response. The response was not terribly helpful. It wasn't terribly helpful. I'll just leave it at that for now. But anyway, so now we basically have 3 options in front of us. Option number 1 is we could petition the Office of the Attorney General again, but ask them very specifically about this specific rule. So instead of asking about rules in general, we could ask them very specifically about this rule and whether it is consistent or inconsistent with our statute and what we need to do about it. Option number 2 is in our 4-year rule review. Part of what we have to do in the preamble of our rule changes is that we have to note the effect of the rule. And so it could be that in the preamble, we explain the effect of using this rule and hope that the governor's office offers some sort of intervention or solution. based on the preamble. Option number 3. Shoot, what was option number 3, Daryl? What's option number 3? Option number 3 is, I should have written it down.
You could basically modify the rules so that they apply to graduate individuals enrolled in a graduate program through a certain date, and then after that, they roll off the books for anybody.
Yes, so option number 3 would go ahead and do some sort of rule change. That would, again, make it so that it's like graduated. So it's like basically after this certain date, if you entered a graduate program after a certain date, then this rule no longer applies to you. And then hopefully there'll be a legislative fix at the next session with the legislators will see if this is expired and this is going to have a negative effect. Does that make sense? So basically those are our 3 options. We are not voting on an option today. I'm just kind of laying this out because what I would like to do is to kick this to the rules committee and have y'all discuss kind of our options and make a decision about whether we need to petition the Office of the Attorney General, whether we need to go ahead and make a rule change and hope that kind of lights a fire under the legislators to get this fixed, or if we need to just cross our fingers and hope that during the 4-year rule review. Say that again.
That it's noticed during the 4-year rule.
Yes.
Can we do more than one of these options?
Yes, so one option might be to go ahead and petition the Office of the Attorney General. If they give us, I mean, it could be if the Office of the Attorney General says, oh, we don't see a problem with this. Oh, whew, okay, then we're free to do what we want to do. If the Office of the Attorney General says, this is problematic, no, you can't have this rule, it's in contradiction to your statute, then we can still do the other 2 options.
Yeah.
You know, we can still do well, we might not be able to do the 4-year rule review because we have to change it for them, but we could still then do the graduated and hope that there's a legislative fix. Does that make sense? Yes.
Couple questions, please. So in option number 1, where we petition the AG, what's the current backlog for the AG? Is there any likelihood that they're going to see this and the level of importance? I can't believe it's going to be that high based on all the things that are happening in the state currently. I mean, maybe that's a Attorney Hyde question. What's the likelihood of that option, Attorney Hyde?
I'll just say it took us 2 years to get the last answer.
Oh.
Anyways,
Can you repeat it a little louder? It was hard to hear the full question.
Not a problem. So one of the options, option number 1, was to petition the Office of the Attorney General. And my question is what is their current backlog? And what is the likelihood that the priority of this is going to raise to such a level that it's going to create a notice by them, that they're going to prioritize it?
That they're going to give us an answer quickly, basically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before the 4-year review.
Well, the honest answer is if you have a crystal ball, you can know exactly when you're going to get the answer to it. There is a requirement. I think it's like 120 days. They usually, I'm going off of memory, but I think there's something that says they
180.
give 180 days that they give you a response. But we've also gotten a letter right before the 180 days that said, hey, we're not going to meet 180 days. So it's going to be longer, sit tight. So just because there is a requirement that says 180 days doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. Now, I don't know that this sort of question is going to go, that would be a more specific question, but you really can't tell like exactly how long they'll take. We would hope it'd be the 180 or less, but it could be more.
Then question number 2, as it relates to option number 2, which is the effect in that it's noticed by the governor's office during the review. What is the likelihood, or what has been the past experience that the governor's office during a 4-year review has looked at something at this level? Has that been the experience? Is that common or uncommon?
Well, the governor's office looks at all the rules when they get proposed or amended. So, I mean, they will look at it. I just don't know to what degree or what comment they may make and say, because they'll come back and say, they like it, they don't like it, whatever. Honestly, don't know what their decision might be though, because they may look at it and not have an issue with it.
Need to approach all 3 simultaneously. It goes for a 3-pronged approach.
Yep. I concur, Madam Chair. you do the 3-prong, you should get an answer. Sooner than later.
I think I'm just gonna, I'm ask the rules committee to address this. And
Yes.
kind of come up with what that 3-pronged approach would look like. And to maybe construct, to write the rule around it, I'm gonna kick it to the rules committee, so y'all can talk about it in a smaller setting. And so that's actually what we need to do now. Oh, actually, I'm so sorry. Let me hear from Ms. Smith first. I didn't see your hand raised. I apologize. Ms. Smith.
No worries. Am I muted?
No,
We
you're
can
good.
hear you. Now you're muted.
Now you're muted.
How about if I look at my screen where it shows? So I have a quick question. While we are in conflicts between our rule and our statute, are we allowed to still be counting all these hours as if we've always done? Or since they did that rule thing, are we counting them?
Yeah, we're counting them.
We ask for an
Janine-
opinion from the
Janine,
AG.
you froze and froze
Okay.
on me there. I couldn't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
After we ask for the AG opinion, do we have to freeze counting those hours, or do we continue to count them until they come back and say yay or nay?
We would continue to count.
Okay, so how far out do we have to make any kind of decision that would prevent us from counting? Right now, we've decided, oh, okay, we've got a problem here. Do we have any time frame that we have to do this, or can we just continue to keep counting them?
When is
Let me say something here. We're getting into a lot of weeds about what ifs and kind of there's a lot of this that really needs to be discussed in the more candid format of the rules committee, to be honest with you, because there are some nuances and there's some pros and there's some cons of just asking for an AG opinion, regardless if you do anything else that we need to talk about. And when I don't know that it's going to be an option to do all three of those things. I'm not really, that's something we'll need to talk about in the rules committee, but my advice would just be I wouldn't get too far down in the weeds into this right here in this meeting, because there's some stuff, there's a level of discussion and candor that we need to have that is better suited for a committee hearing than it is the board meeting, really.
I think it's safe to say that the Texas Government Code requires a 4-year rule review. And so that's the ticking clock, is that you're approaching that 4-year.
Okay, thank
When
you.
it's-
I just wanted to make sure for anyone that was out there listening, that they were not going to be worried that their hours were not still being counted at this time. And so thank you for that clarification, Director Spinks.
Dr. Barty,
Yeah.
Dr. Eller.
And when is the 4-year review? What's the timetable that we have to put all this together?
I think it's in 2024 is when all of the boards are getting reviewed. I don't know the exact months. I know we were looking at that. I just don't have those in front of me, but it's next year.
So if we do our part by the end of this year or the first quarter of 24 and have all this set? No, Ms. Smith? I'm sorry.
If I remember.
I would say that it would be a good idea to do what Director Spinks said and just table the rest of the discussion and have the Rules Committee look at it.
I do have one question about the 4-year rule review. I thought we had decided to stagger those. Are y'all staggering them by months and not years? Okay.
Correct, by months.
Okay, then, Rules Committee, let's schedule a meeting. I do plan on being at that meeting, as well.
So I had sent out an email for a potential Rules Committee meeting on Monday, July 24th, but only Mr. Francis of the Rules Committee was able to attend. I didn't hear back from Mrs. Husband Thompson, but Dr. Barty and Dr. Elder had conflicts, if I remember correctly. Ms. Smith and Dr. Merchant are backup committee members if someone cannot attend.
Janine, are you available on Monday, the 24th from 1 to 3? Or what is it, 1:30? What time did we set for say?
1:30 to 3.
1:30 to 3?
On this coming Monday?
Yes.
Yes, I can be if I'm needed. You bet.
Then let's convene the Rules Committee consisting of Ms. Smith, Ms. Husband Thompson, Mr. Francis and myself for 1:30 Monday, the 24th.
Okay.
Zoom in from Scotland. 1:30.
If you're speaking, I couldn't hear you.
No, I was waiting for permission.
Yes, sir.
If I may, can we have those materials to review? The meeting's on Monday.
I'll send them today.
That'd be great, because in between the US Vietnam game and the Switzerland Chile game, there'll be a perfect window there for some popcorn and reading.
Okay, I think that is all the items that I have on my board report. Is there anything, any discussion or any other questions that maybe the board members might have for me? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 14, report from the board's delegate to BHAC.
Nothing. I already gave it. We met. I'm trying to be succinct. Quit laughing at me.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Appreciate it.
We met on May 23rd, and we didn't make any decisions because we were waiting to see if our bills were going to be approved. They had gone through the House successfully and were killed in the Senate. And so we will go back to the drawing board when we meet again, August 15th. 2 days after my birthday, by the way.
Aw.
Just want to throw that out there.
Mr. Spinks is, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Elder.
Okay, so 2 questions just for clarification. I noticed that there was a change on the investigations of complaints 884.1, and the priority rating system for complaints was moved from 4 levels to 2. I'm just curious about the reasoning and impact and implications of that decision.
I'm going to let Director Spinks tell you what the impact of that is. It's negligible, frankly.
You
The-
won't notice the difference. What it's designed to do is, oh, sorry.
No.
What that change is designed to do is to not hang up applicants. Right now, or the way it did work is if an applicant had a complaint, even if it was a low-level complaint, we would end up holding their application in abeyance. And as you're well aware, most of the complaints that are filed with the agency are dismissed for lack of grounds, lack of basis for those complaints. And so what we were finding is we were needlessly holding people up. So the compromise or the solution was, well, look, let's change it to a 2-tiered priority system, high priority, regular priority. If you get a high priority complaint against you, that will continue to abate your application. We won't let you go forward. If you're a regular priority complaint, you can go forward, but the council and the board still have the ability to discipline your license. If we go ahead and give you the license with the complaint pending, and then it comes to find out you did something naughty, we can go ahead and sanction that license. So that was the compromise, because it was just hanging up a lot of people, and it's not fair to them, given how many dismissals we have, and it fouls up our numbers too, to be honest with you. It wasn't good for anybody, so we changed it.
It didn't change, Jody, it didn't change what we still investigate, and it didn't change what happens to the sanctions. It didn't change the outcome, and it didn't change what we investigate. It's all that's still the same. It just classified everything under 2 umbrellas, instead of like that.
Sure, I can absolutely see the benefit of not holding up applications, because in the long run, we get more licensed professionals out there serving the public. But in addition, our numbers look much better under sunset review next time. So I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense. And my next question was just the AG decision that we got paperwork on. Is that what you were referencing? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly. That's all. Thank you so much.
Mr. Spinks, is there any other updates, council updates, or anything that you want to add?
No, ma'am, not that I can think of. It's
Then
been pretty quiet.
we're going to move on to agenda item number 15, report from the board administrator. So you are up, Ms. Betzold. I think my numbers are off. Sorry. Sarah?
I'm sorry. I'm coming. Wanted to share my screen and realized I didn't have it up. So I just wanted to, Chaplain Stoglin mentioned earlier about the July 19th lunch event with the council's staff. And from the homepage, you can go to the meeting dates for the council and scroll down to the bottom, and you have a link to the council's YouTube channel, and you can see that we've posted the July 19th thing there. So if you missed it or you want to share it with a friend, you can play through it there. Also back to, oops, didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. Fingers are stuttering. Back to the home page. If you go to an update on, if you go to the top of the page and to the quick links on the right-hand side, the second one is proposed rule changes in the rulemaking process. There's an update to the meeting materials. The Behavioral Health Council published 88261 licensing provisions for service members and military spouses. Proposed rules were published on July 14th. And so if you'd like to submit a comment on that, you can use the convenient form that's right here on our webpage. And note that the public comment period ends on August 13th. And I'm going to go back up to our homepage and ask everyone to check again on our quick links, go to verify a license or check license status. And this is the online portal that shows in real time our public information about our licensees. There's been a number of inquiries, mostly from social work, but I've had one or two from marriage and family therapy in this last week, where they thought they renewed their license back in January or back in March, and they somehow looked at something or someone told them their license was delinquent. And that's because they never completed their fingerprint process. So go here and check by name or by your license number and make sure that if you renewed recently in the last year, I'd say, just go ahead and check and make sure that everything went through the way you thought it was going to. And also, if you're expecting correspondence from the council or from our staff, please check your spam and your junk folders. Oftentimes the recipient's Outlook or email device filters our replies to those junk or those spam folders. So check those as well as your inbox. I wanted to point out and thank staff for new statutes and rules. I'm clicking on the right-hand quick link to statutes and rules. We have new consolidated rule books. The rules became effective June 15th, and the rule book, as you can see, was updated on June 16th and posted on June 16th. So just wanted to make you aware of that. If you download that PDF for easy reference on your laptop, you'll want to download this most recent version. And going back to the council's homepage and using the quick links on the right-hand side, go down to the bottom and check out the workforce survey. Please complete the survey if you haven't already. There's a launch button here. It's open until December 31st. 2023. And if you want to check out what data we've collected so far, there's little buttons here that you can check out some of the data and analysis on that. And back up to the council's homepage. On the right-hand side, quick links. If you go to how-to user guides, Mr. Spear has posted a helpful link on how to look up past rules. So if you're having to do any research on past rules, there's a helpful hint there on how to do it. And then finally, of course, the 4-member boards are listed in the header on our website, and those are links. So when you want to look for something specific to marriage and family therapy, click on that link for marriage and family therapy. I'd like to bring to your attention very helpful information on the FAQs, particularly about telehealth services when you're going across state lines or across or in another country. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And I believe that finishes my report.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, agenda item number 16, discussion of possible action regarding future priorities and activities of the board. So is there anything else that needs to be on the board's radar that the board members would like to bring to our attention? Yes.
Well, I have some follow-up questions from last meeting as I was reviewing minutes, just to kind of get a pulse of where those things are at. The first is last time we discussed HB 5149, which was applicable to the counseling field regarding non-compete agreements. And I'm curious about the status and how that does or does not apply.
That bill didn't pass.
Okay, thank you. Yep, check that off. Okay, so the last time we met, we also talked about the possibility of an automated CE system. I'm curious where we're at with that.
Sorry, go ahead, Janine. Oh, the council has instructed me to put together a RFP or a solicitation for bid for the various providers who could provide that type of service. So that's what I'm working on. Candidly, I've just been dealing with post-session wrap-up stuff, implementing the bills that were passed and doing that kind of thing, playing catch up. So I haven't even had a chance to start that yet, but that's still on my to-do list.
Okay, I'm just curious. I'm glad we're moving forward with that. I think that'll be incredibly beneficial in the long run. The other thing was I wanted to ask the last time we met, there was a discussion about a BHEC audit report that is going to be released in August. What's the timeline on that? Is that still coming up?
Still under audit. They're still, the auditors are still here.
Okay. And then last but not least, I went and looked at, I love whoever did this. Kudos to you. Adding to the website the ability for people to submit public comment makes it so much easier. And there are some great fields in there. There's one field that I did not see that I'm curious about the pros and cons of adding. Because I've always heard when you submit public comment, you not only give a rationale for why you like or don't like the proposed rule, but you also include, here's how I think the wording should read. And that helps us as board members when we are receiving public comment to go, okay, well, you don't like it, but how do you want it to look? And I'm wondering if that could be beneficial to us to add a field, and if that, how complicated it might be to do that.
We can, oh, I'll shut up. Janine.
I think Janine has something else.
I have something unrelated, so I'd rather wait till you're finished and come back to me.
The way I designed that form, Dr. Elder, is if you've got an alternate suggestion, you would put it in with the comment yourself, or in with the comment itself. It's not only can you explain why you do or don't like something, but you should go ahead and add, if you've got alternate language, just go ahead and include that in the comment. I didn't put it as a separate field. I don't know why. To me, in my mind, they all just kind of go together. Here, I don't like this because, or I do like this, but it could be better. And here's how. That's how I think, and so that's how I designed it. But I'm not saying we couldn't do it a different way. That's how it got to how it. That's how it was built the way it was, though.
Well, kudos to you for building it. I think it's a fabulous option to try to engage the public more readily. Does anybody else have thoughts about,
No, say it.
just leave it the way it is? Okay, all right, thank you. That's it.
Attorney Hyde, and then we'll go to Ms. Smith.
Oh, you already answered the question. It was just that there's not a requirement in the government code that the commenters submit their changed language. It's just it's open-ended, submit a comment. I like it, I love it, I hate it, I want it to be this, I don't want it to be that. You know, it's pretty, just comment on how you want. So that was all I was gonna say.
Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Smith?
Mine was just a complimentary to Ms. Fasthold and all the team as she was going through it. I'm still so amazed at how streamlined and how easy our websites are now to find things versus, 15 years ago. Just staff is doing an amazing, amazing job. I just wanted to give them kudos for that. It's just brilliant. Brilliant. Every time I think, oh, we're at the pinnacle, boom, they come up with something else great. So I just wanted to give a thank you to that.
Thank you. We appreciate that genuinely.
Any other discussion or possible future priorities for?
I typically don't like a lot of discussion, but I just want to say that it is great, the great state of Texas. We typically don't think of our state as a bellwether state. We've had other states that to be viewed for years and years as bellwether states. But the fact of the matter is that we have BHEC, which is a bellwether state situation. And then with the website being easier to access, has been discussed. There is no reason that no one should not understand the functionality and the reason that the BHEC exists. And I think it goes to these people on the screen and their staff who don't see to make this happen. I think, Madam Chair, that this is an outstanding example of when this state decides to do something, it does it in a big, grand way. And I think that's something that we need to really applaud and be proud of, because we have a comprehensive mental health approach to help our citizens. And that is a tremendous accomplishment from people sitting around this room and on this screen. And I just wanted to point that out, that this is interesting, this is futuristic, this is helping our citizens and our practitioners and our future practitioners. So I just want us to be aware of that. And I want the audience and the state and the citizens of the great state of Texas to know that their interest is being held high.
Thank you.
Good work. Good work.
First, I'd just like to welcome, looks like Reverend Dr. Scoma has
Yes.
joined us. So you get to show us your lovely face, Pastor Scoma,
And hopefully a lovely background.
and hopefully look.
He's
Oh,
not
darn.
going to show. He's-
Oh,
Well, it's,
he's
what
not-
time is it? It's like 11 o'clock over here.
Oh, gosh.
Guys, I'm hanging laundry on a rack. in Sicily. I didn't know you could see me. I was just gonna listen in and make sure I could hear the good business of my colleagues, but I did not mean to interrupt. But yeah, we've been here in Sicily for about 6 weeks now, and no, month. We were in Scotland for a couple of weeks. So 2 more to go, and then we'll be back to the great state of Texas.
Hoorah.
And it's you guys are having record heats there, so.
Okay, okay, Mr. Francis,
I've been thinking about this, so I'm not quite sure how to frame it up.
okay,
I figured out how to frame it up from the perspective of how it works with this board, which is the protection of the citizens of the state of Texas, which means that we need to provide them access to healthcare, mental health care. So I know how it works there, but what I don't know is, one of the comments that we talk a lot about is that in our organization, we see a decline in the number of people who are, we don't see as many people getting licenses, right? Or comparative to other organizations. And the question that comes to my mind, what are the barriers that are in place that is happening that is preventing people from wanting to come into the profession or slows them down from coming into the profession? And as a board, what can we do to remove those barriers, be it in the rules, be it in the policies that we set? And I don't know, in the time that I've been here, that we collectively have had a conversation about that. And we talk about things that come to us, right? Or things that happen, or things that are posted, or laws that are, bills that come through. But we don't talk about what we could proactively do to help the citizens of Texas or help the situation, to get more practitioners engaged and involved. And I'm not sure of what form that would take. But what I would ask is that we think about that so that we can get ahead of this, because it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better unless we do something actively about it and we truly understand what the problem is. If we ask the question of what is the problem, but then we solve the question of identifying the problem, then we can get to the solution and how we work the solution to fix it. But we're not even at the point of truly understanding what is the problem. But if we don't start now, it could be many more terms of all of us, or many of us won't even be here, and that problem will still exist. And we'll still be saying the same comments in these meetings of, how do we provide access, declining access in West Texas? We don't have enough supervisors, or, whatever it may be. So like I said, it's just been in my head, but I don't know how to frame it up in a comprehensive conversation, or how it fits on the agenda, or which committee it goes to provide a report back to the board for specific actions, recommendations that we can take to start planning for this and to start to remedy this. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think, as you know, I was in my alma mater 2 months ago, and they were talking, University of Wisconsin, and they were talking about the decline of student enrollment across the UW system in the country. And I think there's a struggle within the country's culture of what is a family. And so you have that. And then how do people commit themselves to practically a 6-year commitment, 4 years of college, 2 years for a master's degree and all of that? I think there is a struggle, not necessarily within our field, but I think in the country, of what it means to commit yourself to 6 years of education, plus clinical internships and so forth. I think it's a cultural struggle. And maybe we can talk about that. And I think these focus groups that Madam Chair talked about earlier can maybe help identify some of that, and then bring it back to us as a board, or whoever's on the board, to discuss, review, and maybe be proactive. I don't know if that answers your question or concerns, but it is a true struggle within the culture. It's a struggle within the priesthood, people going into the priest. We have more people with gray hair than black hair. The military is struggling with this. The doctors, the medical healthcare is struggling with this. So I think it's a national struggle. Not to replace your concern, but this is not, this field is not alone in its numbers and as it looks at its future practitioners.
And following along with that, I think the numbers of providers based on the increasing population of the state of Texas is that maintaining a reasonable ratio. In other words, are we getting more people coming into Texas with fewer providers to provide services, mental health services for them? And I think that would be a really great discussion for us to have. And I don't know is that a board driven or is that an association driven concept?
And I asked that question. The reason why I came to the decision to bring it to the board and why I think it's board driven, because I think it directly applies to protecting the citizens of the state of Texas. If we are creating hindrances, or we're creating barriers, or we're creating obstacles, or we're not removing obstacles, or removing barriers, or removing hindrances, then we're not protecting the citizens. And that's why I think it's the matter of this board to discuss.
I think it's legit. And in conclusion, and I'll yield, I'm working on sermons, as I said earlier. And in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex alone, 3 years ago, we were 7.2 million people. Today, we're 7.9 million people, depending upon who you ask. In Tarrant County alone, we are getting 5,000 people a month in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so we're now 7.9 million.
So these would be conversations that could be with graduate school programs, undergraduate school programs, at the academic level?
I don't know. I'm just
You're just
bringing,
raising the question.
Right.
I wasn't looking to solve for it. I don't know how to address it or what to do with it. And so I just decided that it's appropriate to bring to the board.
It's a relevant question.
I mean, I would say, I guess one of my initial thoughts, I think kind of as we were talking about Chaplain Scotland, I think there are broader,
Yes.
you know, you think about, I mean, one of the problems we're having at ECU is that our enrollment is down, not just at, not in my program specific, but like the entire university, in part because there are fewer people,
Yes.
you know, of that age, as you just think about birth rates, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, so in some sense, like part of it has to do with that, but then also part of it is psychology is a much more known field. You know what I mean? Whenever you're in high school and you're thinking, oh, I want to go in the world, I want to help people, you think either psychology or social work. And so that tends to be, they tend to draw more people. I mean, I wouldn't be a marriage and family therapist, except that I stumbled across the very last brochure for a marriage and family therapy program. And I was like, what is this? You know what I mean? It was just a complete God thing how I ended up in this field. And so, I mean, so I think there are things that are outside of our control, but I think there also are things that are within our control that do create barriers to licensure. And I think the board has done some
Yes.
work to reduce some of those. But I think there's probably still more work to do, you know, especially trying to find, you know, people to practice in our rural communities, or trying to find more supervisors, or I do think that there's definitely things the board can do to be proactive. So we can control, you know, address the things that we do have control over.
Those things that are inside of our sphere of influence.
So it could be, you know, it might be that again, if we can do some of these focus groups, that might be a good place to begin. You know, talking to universities, talking to licensees, talking to supervisors, talking to supervisees, and figuring out just what some of those barriers are, and then remedying the things that we can remedy. Or maybe it is us doing things like, you know, the outreach committee doing more to make people even know that we have a profession. Maybe that's where we bring in TMFT and have TMFT involvement to try to,
And at the undergrad level,
yeah.
to get, to plant the seeds to go to graduate school, to move toward licensure and make people happy.
One of the other problems with our profession is like psychology has a feeder undergraduate program. Psychology, you know what I mean? You get a degree, a bachelor's degree in psychology, and you go and, you know, you pick your specialization, counseling or school or, you know, whatever. And for the longest time, MFT hasn't really had a feeder undergraduate program. Now some like human development, family studies, child and family services has kind of become like the de facto kind of feeder, but it's, you know, historically those programs were like home economics, you know what I mean? Teaching how to sew and doing nutrition and all those kinds of things. And so it's only been in the last maybe 10 or 15 years that those programs have started to become feeder programs in marriage and family therapy. And so that's been another one of our, I think, our issues too, is we just don't have feeder undergraduate programs that are like psychology or social work. But again, those are outside of our sphere of influence. We just have to focus on the things that are within it.
Good thought.
Okay. Anything else under agenda item number 16? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 17, which is public comment.
So we'll take those that are in the room with y'all first, and I'll just briefly go through my housekeeping notes on public comment. For members of the public wishing to give public comment, once the public comment item is reached on the agenda after the meeting convenes, the presiding officer will allow those who are attending in person to give public comment first, and then ask those who are joining by computer to use the raised hand feature to indicate who would like to make a public comment. Those individuals who use the raised hand feature will then be unmuted to give public comment. Once all individuals with the raised hand have been given an opportunity, the individuals appearing by telephone will be unmuted and asked to whether they would like to make a public comment. Please note that public comment is not intended for a discussion or question and answer session with the board. Additionally, when making public comment, please identify yourself and whether you are speaking individually or on behalf of an organization. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise directed by the presiding officer. So would anyone there in the room like to make public comment? And I believe we determined earlier that the mic toward the back of the room away from me doesn't work very well. So come up to the front.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alex Morton. I'm a, excuse me, I'm a recent graduate of the Texas Wesleyan program. The last topic that you guys brought up was in relation to why possible licensure is being held up and why there's a decrease in that. I personally know at least 4 people in my graduate program who dropped out for financial reasons. Several people on the GI Bill, there's been shakeups in there that have created barriers to people being able to financially afford coming to graduate school. An idea I thought of was maybe do focus groups within the student classes and maybe incentivize them, be 2 people from each class possibly, to participate in asking that question to groups of people. And the demographics in our program are, fresh out of undergrad to, retirement age. Also, the licensure, my track was professional counseling, so I'm a little out of my league here, but I will say that the discrepancies between the licensure of professional counseling and MFTs, if I fail my PC exam, I think I have 4 weeks and then I can take it again. MFTs are on a monthly cycle, on a quarterly cycle, correct me if I'm wrong, and they're proctored. I'm allowed to take mine with an online proctor from my living room, with obviously certain, passport and IDs and all that stuff. I would say that the people I have talked to in the MFT program who took 8, 9, 12 months to get licensed after graduation, that was a big part of theirs. The process itself has so many things between FBI fingerprints, the counselor examinations and such. It's a long list. It's a really tall order. And if they do fail, there's a waiting period and a reapplication process that's been a barrier to them actually getting licensed. The people I know who it took a year for them to get licensed. So there's a lot of steps in there. The discrepancy between being able to retake it between professional counseling and MFT creates that. And then enrollment so low, in my opinion, and in my personal experience, it's due to financial ability to enroll in a graduate program. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, very helpful.
But you got to speak up so I can hear you.
There you go. And I can see you.
Okay.
But just speak up. so that-
Hi, everyone. My name is Violeta Gutierrez. I'm one of the faculty here. And one of the things that I was thinking about when you were all talking about the licensure and particularly switching licenses between different states. I'm actually a perfect example of that as I came from Wisconsin. I had the longest process. I want to say it took quite a long time. And I really appreciate when you are looking at the different states and you listed there are 18 states that take 5 years, so and so that take 2 years, 1 year. And as you were talking about removing barriers for people being licensed in different states and transferring their license from across states, I really appreciate that you all mentioned looking at making it for the 1 year of practice or making any different sort of decisions on that, because I think that will remove that barrier. And as a person who personally went through the process, I really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much for looking into that and making those positive changes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room?
No, ma'am.
So I'm looking at the attendees that are participating by computer. And at this time, I see no one with a raised hand. And I don't see anyone attending by phone. Still no raised hands, so I believe that ends public comment.
That means we are on to agenda item number 19 or somewhere around there, because I don't have an 18 on my list.
Number next.
Number next.
Madam Chair, before I move that we adjourn, I just want to have everyone to know about the GI Bill, which is the 911. If you go, particularly in the great state of Texas, if you go to any state university or college, tuition because of cost is paid for. But if you go to a private university or college, it's prorated. So, and they get housing, they get books, they get parking. And so if the ratio of charges or tuition at a private college supersedes what the GI Bill lays out, that's why there's a difference. So I'm not naming any university or colleges. Some college and universities will charge them a pro rate based on a state tuition. And then veterans or their spouses, because you can pass it on to your spouse. If you don't want to go, you can, your wife, your daughter, your grandchildren, if you provide proof that you raised your grandchild or grandchildren, then you can pass it on to them. So that's just in case if you need that for future knowledge. With that, Madam Chair, I move the vision.
Well, first let me see, is there any other announcements or comments not requiring board action? Okay, then yes, let's move on. We have a motion on the floor to adjourn. Do I have a second? We got a second. Any further discussion? Okay, everybody's in favor of adjourning, raise your hand. Yeah, I don't know. We are adjourned. This feels good, yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all. Take it easy.
Anthony,
Thank you.
enjoy St. Louis.
Jabona.
Bye, guys. I missed you. Sorry I wasn't there. But we'll see you in the fall.
October.
Yes.
October, I think.
September.
September. It is September.
September.
Yep, you got it.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It'll